Yeah, my name is Andrew Bose. I'm the founder of Darwinian Ventures, which is a firm of about 15 people. We've been around for a while. We've been around for 8 years. And all we do is set up go-to-market teams for companies. So we set up the first sort of non-founder sales team for companies. And from that, we've grown to do many other things as well. So we'll help mid-size and even large growth companies with their sales. I'll talk about some details. But that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. Before that, I was a founder CEO of myself. So I've raised venture. I've raised two seed rounds. I've sold a company for a profitable exit, which was great. Was not huge, but it was profitable. So, hooray. And I even worked in mergers and acquisitions as my very first job, which was actually quite helpful in like selling companies eventually. So it's a really great lens for building products and for building companies to sort of understand how they fit into the acquisition world because you may not end up being an IPO giant Microsoft. You may end up as a takeout by one of the other mid-sized companies. So that's a bit about my background. I'm a Canadian. You can see my pillow. Although I'm downtown San Francisco, I've been in San Francisco for 12 years. Marianne is also from Montreal. Hell yeah. If there's any other Canadian mafia in the audience, shoot me a Canada flag emoji. Let's go. So that's who I am. I do a lot of community stuff, so I'm at a lot of the Founders Bay events. I host my own events and dinners and things like that, and that's kind of what I really love to do. So this is a bit about me. So that first company was called App Fuel. It was about 12 years ago. We raised a seed round and got bought. I joined Skyport Systems, which is an incubation by Sutter Hill Ventures. If you don't know Sutter Hill Ventures, stop what you're doing and look them up. They are absolutely badass. They incubated NVIDIA, which is insane. You've heard of NVIDIA, I'm sure. They've also incubated Snowflake, which is huge. It's like 70, 80 billion. And they do these really big incubations where they put a lot of great, PhD level scientists and a lot of capital, really kind of secretively at first, and then they spin them out as big companies. So I was really lucky to be the first business hire at one of those. Raised about 70 million. We were bought by Cisco. And then ever since then, I've been at Darwinian Ventures, which I mentioned earlier, which has done, I think it's close to 130 engagements at this point over 8 years. Three of them have become unicorns, which is very exciting. Some of them are much larger, some of them have been bought. And most recently, before I started working with Cred, which I'll discuss in a bit, I was the head of sales for Spectrio, which is about $120 million of revenue a year. So I led about a 100-person team. The really interesting thing about that was that the principles are the same no matter what size of company. So the things that we go and teach to early companies and we put in place as vendors and as staffing and service providers are mostly the same. The structure and the principles of it are the same, no matter how big or small. It all actually boils down to some really simple things, which we'll talk about. So that was really fun. That just wrapped up in April, and I joined Cred. Cred, we should take a look at. I need to add it to this slide, but it is basically like a ZoomInfo or an Apollo or a Clay. It's a really powerful data platform for finding your next set of customers and for doing AI sort of audience measurement and determining where you should put your go-to-market dollars. We actually, as Darwinian, we helped them raise about $15 million worth of seed. So that's, a big kickoff. That was just a month ago. And we're really excited to get Cred going. Again, I'll add it to the slide. We also do a little bit of investing. We realized early that like some of our clients became unicorns. Like I said, that doesn't mean we got any shares in them at all. So we started realizing that we're missing out on all these opportunities. So we started writing some small checks. We'd like to do a lot more of that and hopefully co-invest with Founders Bay. I know Founders Bay is doing some investing projects as well. But we're really, really excited with that project. A little bit about the firm. So 8 years, we've done 126 total sales leadership engagements. We've done 32 of those, we actually managed the entire thing, staffed the entire thing. Like we were the people that owned the number and went out and found the deals and did everything. And we've done 0 to a million 15 times as a firm. And there's quite a few more where maybe they were already at 500,000 or maybe they were already at 1 million and we got them to 2 or 3 or something like that. So we've done this a whole lot. And we've done it in a bunch of different industries and with a bunch of different sort of founder types. And there's a couple. So what I'm going to focus on in this talk is more about the universal principles and the universal mindset and the universal sort of pro tips and big mistakes that everyone makes and the things that are not that intuitive, so that you can really kind of weather the storm and make this journey successfully on your own. And then a couple of bragging points down below. We've worked with a couple of really great companies. I think I mentioned most of them. Nooks is probably the most interesting. They just they're about to raise a Series B. We helped them get to their sales use case. They're a great sales calling tool, which we use heavily across all our clients. Okay, and then a bit about us. Whenever you're ready, we'd love to work with you. We do sales acceleration where we help you. We staff in a salesperson. We put in all the infrastructure and the job description and basically quota and how you build the role. And we help you get to that $1 million or $2 million milestone. But what's more important than the dollars is the repeatable process. Most of you guys are running tech companies, which means that you can sell the same bit of code 100 times or 1,000 times or 10,000 times. So the more valuable thing for you is not so much the dollars in the early days. Like when you get to $1 million in revenue, the dollars are fine. Like, thank you, that's great. You take them. But the most important thing is not the dollars. It's the repeatable process and the patterns that you discover getting there. And that's a really, really, really important thing. So we're gonna zoom in on that for the most part in this discussion. So that's the sales acceleration piece. We'd love to work with you guys. We do it all the time. We also do leadership advisory where it's like a sort of CEO thing. We take a little bit of equity and we can be like a weekly or a monthly or quarterly kind of touch point to help you guys find the right sales leaders and avoid these mistakes on an ongoing basis. And then community is a huge thing. We do a lot of this with Founders Bay, and we'd like to continue doing more. We do a dinner series here at my home. I've got a big dining room. We do a charity concert every year in September. We're doing one in September. It's September 5th and 6th. Last year we had MC Hammer. It's all local musicians that have a great history. I'm a musician myself, so we have a lot of ties there. But last year we had Shania. It was all these musicians from different bands. We had Shania Twain's keyboardist. We had MC Hammer. We had Zach Brown Band's drummer, and we just did a bunch of great songs from all those people. They all live in the Bay and they love the Bay and they really want to celebrate San Francisco music. So that's a little bit about us. All right. So let's talk about $1 million in ARR. So it's not what it used to be because of inflation, but it's still the big milestone that people look at and that investors really want to see. And the reason for that is, in fact, here's a quote that I just heard that I'm surprised it took this long for me to hear, but I think it summarizes this journey really well. And this is actually Mike Spicer, who is one of the Sutter Hill big wigs. He incubated Snowflake, which I mentioned before, went from 0 to $70 billion valuation in, I think, 8 years, something like that. And the quote is, 0 to 1 million is an art, 1 million to 10 million is math. And I think that's a really good quote. It really summarizes it. Getting from 0 to 1 million is art because it takes a lot of really creativity. You have to create paths and you have to find patterns and you have to discover what's going on with your customer and you have to learn how the market reacts to different things. There's no textbook, there's no playbook. They don't teach this stuff at school. You can use a bunch of formulaic things, but it's not going to help you unless you're really paying attention. You really have to get creative and pour your heart into discovering what will get you to that first million. Once you get to the million, if you do it right, you have some patterns and you have some math and you can double it and triple it and 10x it and 100x it and 1000x it, literally. I mean, that's how tech works. And you can multiply it to get to whatever your big goal is. And I assume most of you, if you're in the tech entrepreneurship arena, you have ambitions of becoming $1 billion business or a $10 billion business. The only way to do that is to find repeatability, because software, again, you can sell the same software 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, doesn't matter. And that's how you get from 1 million to 10 or 100 or whatever it is your market can accommodate. So when you're getting to $1 million, you're looking at experimentation, you're taking a lot of risk, you're pathfinding. I think that word is really important. You're pathfinding and you're discovering what works. And then usually after you've gotten to $1 million, you're looking for repeatability, you're looking for scalability, and you're looking for efficiency, and you're looking for speed. So that's why it's such a meaningful milestone, and investors really take it very seriously for that exact reason. So I touched on some of this, but I think these are the main points. So ARR, annual recurring revenue, recurring. That R is the most important of the three letters. It's recurring revenue. Now that's really handy because payroll is also recurring, you know? Your rent for your office space, also recurring. Your subscriptions for any tools you're getting, recurring. Your business expense, your operating expense, your OpEx is recurring. So getting to 1 million in recurring revenue is a really big deal. And the fact that it's recurring is really helpful. It allows you to run a business. The survival point is also quite important. Usually at around 1 million, the wonderful thing is you're not going to die really ever. Like you're at the point now where you can survive and you can have a skeleton team and you can continue to run a business even if you run out of venture capital. Because 1 million in annual revenue, you can support, a couple of employees, you can have some salespeople, you can have some engineers, you can rent maybe, I don't know, WeWork space, whatever it is, but you're not going to die. So the concept of runway kind of becomes a little bit softer. Like the end of the runway is a little bit softer because if you need to, you can cut your expenses and you can keep going. And then viability, I think I mentioned this a couple times, but it really indicates that there's something in the market that you found that works and you have a viable business that can continue to grow. And scalability, obviously, as well. Again, so you can sell the same thing many, many times over. So what's more important than the dollars is figuring out the data points that can make it repeatable and scalable. So what I've done for the purposes of this discussion is we have broken it into 4 chapters. And again, I can't do very much in terms of specific tactics in an hour. And the other problem is it's different for everyone because it's an art, not a science. But the one thing that we have discovered doing this so many times is that there's some mindset things and some really obvious mistakes that are easy to make. Like there's some parts of this journey that are not intuitive, and we can help you find those and identify those and dodge those, and that's kind of what we'll focus on for this talk. So the chapters here are $0 to $1. This is trying to get some dollars out of your customers, and this kind of proves that it's worth something. And in fact, let me pause for a second. All of these chapters have a really important caveat. These chapters are all assuming that you're not using favors at all. So when I say $0 to $1, don't go get your wealthy uncle or your best friend or your former boss to go and buy something. That actually doesn't count. I would exempt that. I like carve that out. That's separate. What you want is $1 from a complete stranger who doesn't care about you, really. They just need to solve a problem and they're willing to spend any money to fix it. So that's getting to your first dollar, getting a couple of contracts over the line. I actually think that most companies, most startups go for too long trying to do free trials and free, what do they call it? They call it like design partners or pilots or anything like that. If you're going to do any of these things, try to get a discount, like charge whatever you think you can charge, but then discount it by 90% or 95% because the most valuable thing here is trying to get something over the line where they actually have to sign a contract and they actually have to pay you even $10. Doesn't matter. Get them to pay something. And then you've sort of gone through this chapter. From $1 to 100K in revenue, this is where you're starting to learn whether or not this product can be sold. So you're out there, you're hopefully getting, 5 or 6 or 10 customers to get to this milestone. You're starting to learn how to actually sell it and you're starting to prove to the world that it actually can be sold. So that gets you to maybe at 100K mark, something like that. From 100K to 300K, this is an interesting one. I remember all the times I've raised a seed round, investors all say they want to see 1 million in ARR, but there's an interesting milestone at 300K. We actually had a lot of investors that would subtly and even explicitly tell us that they're looking for 300K in revenue for a seed round because in their mind, once you can get to 300K, it starts to look a little bit more like math. Like if you can get to 300K, maybe you can get to 1 million because you're starting to really get some traction. So getting from 100 to 300K, you're looking for a process, and it doesn't mean you have a process. You shouldn't already think that you have a process. But from the journey from 100K to 300K, start looking at every little data point that you can with the wins that you're getting, and learn from them and map it out. And you're going to have a lot of wasted time and a lot of wasted effort. It's not wa It'll feel like it's wasted. It's not actually wasted because you're learning what's working, what's not working. You're learning how to talk about things. You're learning what types of pricing maybe work and which ones don't. You're learning how to get these contracts over the line. Like, how do you actually get people to sign and to do things and to buy things? You're still going to lose a lot of deals. That's fine. But if you can get from 100K to 300K, start looking for the little constellation of data points and patterns, and you're really in kind of creative pathfinding mode here. And then from 300K to a million, this is typically where the founder doesn't do it by themselves anymore. So what we've seen is that most of the time founder CEOs can get to the first 300K, sometimes more, sometimes they can get it to a million or beyond. But starting around here is where you want to start to try to get other people to win deals. Can the team scale? So can this be taught to other people? And this is really crucial. You gotta sort of fire yourself a little bit. So the CEO usually does all the sales in the beginning, but you have to slowly, even if it feels like maybe some deals will go a little slower, try to get somebody else to do it, to get to a million. So, and that's key, right? Because you're going to go and sell the same thing 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times over for the next 10 years. So if you can't do that by yourself. So it's really critical in this chapter that you start to see if the team can scale. So I'll just pause there. These are the 4 chapters that we're going to discuss. I'll go through each one. We'll spend 5-10 minutes on each one and talk about some pro tips and some mistakes that people make and just the sort of headspace for each of these. Okay. All right. So this $0 to $1. So this chapter is pre-revenue. So you're in this chapter until you get your first dollar of any kind. Now this one is probably the most stressful because you've probably put your whole life into this thing and you've invested a lot of your time and a lot of your effort into this thing. And you still are not quite sure whether or not it can be sold for dollars. And again, ignore anything from buddies, like relatives, wealthy friends, your golden retriever, any of this feel-good crap that people do to tell themselves that it's going to be successful. What you need to really focus on is trying to find a complete stranger in your market who will spend money and go to the trouble of getting your contract approved and go to the trouble of getting like even $10, $100 over the finish line to get your product paid for. I think the biggest thing that I will comment on this one is it's really 2 things. One of them is it's a little bit comfortable for founders to kind of stay in this like safety blanket of being in stealth mode. A lot of you guys have heard this stealth mode thing a lot. I think stealth mode, whenever I hear that, I think most of the time the founders are actually just a little bit scared to go and get beat up. And you got to kind of push through that discomfort. Unless you're doing something that's really technical and secret and there is actually corporate espionage and ripoffs and stuff like that, you'd be shocked at how little of that actually happens. Even if other people hear about it or see it, the likelihood of somebody going and truly replicating your product and your business is really minimal. But of course, we all have big egos and we think that the whole world wants to know. And so we think, okay, we have to be secret, we have to be sneaky, we have to be in stealth, blah, blah, blah. Get that out of your head. You're flattering yourself enormously by telling yourself that anybody gives a shit at all. So you kind of have to put yourself out into that uncomfortable zone of really actually trying to get dollars. And most of the time, you're better off doing it earlier rather than later, even though it's uncomfortable. I think there's another quote that I heard. Well, I don't remember it exactly, but basically, if you knew ahead of time that you are going to hear no 20 times before you get to a yes, it would make you much happier to hear all those no's. So what you want to do is get out there and get beat up. It doesn't matter. Like every time you get beat up, it feels bad and you try to avoid it. That's how our brains are wired, right? Like you try to avoid, like if you burn your hand on the stove, don't go touch the stove again. But if you knew that you did that 20 times and then there was like $1 billion outcome at the end of it, you would go and burn your hand on the stove 20 times and laugh about it because you know that it's the thing that you need to do to get to understanding how to do it at a large scale. So, so a couple of the points I have here, obviously no cheating. I've said that a million times. There's going to be a lot of handholding and services and instability in the product, but that you just do it anyways. Again, every time you fail, you're getting closer to your goal, as long as you're learning from it and you're active about it. You can expect refund requests. You can expect phone calls and dinners and taking people out and apologizing if something goes down or if something fails. Just get used to that, get comfortable being uncomfortable in this phase and really just try to get something over the finish line. So I think I touched on some of these. I'm kind of going out of order here, but this pro tip, even when you're in R&D mode or stealth mode, doesn't matter. Don't like nobody cares. Just get out there and have meetings, meet people, talk to people, share the product, try to get feedback as early as you can, and push yourself out of that safety blanket of stealth. And and then this bottom one I think is really important. I'll talk on that. I'll speak about that a little bit. Try to get some dollars. More importantly than the dollars, try to get your paperwork over the finish line. This is a really big one. What we used to do at the companies that I've run is, like I'll give you an example of SAP. So SAP is an enormous customer. We won them early at one of my former tech companies, and we knew that there was no budget. So, but we also kind of knew that a giant company like SAP, there's going to be a lot of paperwork and a lot of procurement and security checks, and like we got to go get approvals from all these different people, blah, blah, blah. So for us, we told them, hey, we'll give you this product for 95% off. I think we ended up charging $10 a month or something like that. Like it was nothing. And normally subscriptions were 200 or 300. It was like a multi-thousand-dollar annual contract. But we said, hey, we'll do this for $10. Um, but it has to be an annual contract. We have to go through all the steps so that we're an approved vendor. Like being an approved vendor for us was worth $10 million because we could go and raise a seed round by saying that we are an approved vendor for all of SAP. So we tried to get $10 over the finish line, and that changes things a lot. So, you can also do things like waive the first month, waive the first 6 months, give them a huge discount, but then when it auto renews, like try to set it up so that when your contract renews, it goes up to list price. And that gives them a lot of time to try it. There's no real money involved, and then they can get out of it. And then it renews to whatever it is your list price is. The other thing with pricing is, especially here, even though you don't necessarily know exactly what your price is, you gotta have conviction and you have to at least have a theory of what you're charging for it, but don't present it as a theory. Present it as a rock solid thing. We charge 5K a month, 5K a year for an annual contract. This is what it's worth. But you're a new customer, we'll do 95% off, we'll do it for $20, whatever, but we have to get the contract signed. Otherwise, it's not worth our time. Why would we spend time doing all this free work for you? And most people really understand that, and they'll respect you more for asking for that type of a thing. So always try to get some price, even if it's discounted, and wait for something to really stick. Don't do these like handshake, free design partner. I mean, you can do a little bit of that, but really avoid that as much as you can. Get something signed that's an annual thing and discount it to whatever. It doesn't matter. Again, the money is not important at all. You're not gonna be making enough revenue to make a difference to your expenses for a while. So just get comfortable burning money and burning time. But the main thing for you that's worth tens of millions of dollars to your company value is getting any type of an annual thing with any type of money attached to it signed and paid from a complete stranger, especially at a big company. Like that's a really, really important one. Okay, so that's the pre-revenue chapter. Get out of stealth, get out there, get beat up. It's going to suck. Do it anyways. Try to get some dollars, try to get some contract over the line. If it happens with a friend or a stranger, that's great. Or sorry, if it happens with a friend or a relative or whatever, that's fine. But really prove to yourself that you can do it with someone who doesn't know you. And then you're graduating to the next chapter, which is the no longer pre-revenue, but still below 100K chapter. So this chapter is an interesting one. This one, you're trying to figure out selling a couple times over. So usually you need 5 or 10 or 20 contracts to get to 100K in annual revenue. Um, what it means is that you're getting a couple of groups, you're getting many different sets of groups to agree to something. And that's really important, especially if you're selling B2B. You need to, like most of B2B sales is getting a bunch of different personality types to agree to something. Like your CFO, you have to get them to agree, and they hate risk, right? And they hate spending money. Then the product person really just needs some feature or some function, right? And then your sales, each group has a very different personality type and a very different set of goals. And for you to get to 100K, there's no way around this. You have to get 5 or 10 or 20 groups of different personality types to agree to something. So that's a really important one. And you're trying to figure out what is that sales process that works. And again, when you're presenting prices and stuff, you have to, even if you're not sure, can like sell it to say, this is the price, this is what it's worth, this is what we charge. But then give them some concessions, give them some discounts, give them a free month, give them whatever you need to do to get it over the finish line. But this second point, you're going to start to see some trends and you're going to start to see some consistent things that are happening over time. You're still going to see a lot of stalled deals. You're still going to see a lot of failure, a lot of folks that ghost you, a lot of folks that maybe were interested and they're not anymore. Some folks might evaluate you, but they're still going to want to go with a more proven option. Especially in B2B, the biggest pushback usually for an early company is risk that you're too small and too early. So I've seen this many times, even as a executive at a very large company. We would see small companies that had a better set, a better feature. They had better features, better pricing, better everything. But because somehow they got the impression that it was a small company, they didn't want to take the risk because they don't care. It's not their money, right? It's their job, and they don't want to deal with the stress in their job of dealing with a brand new infant company. So you're going to start to recognize that and pull that out in your first 100K. But close as many of these deals as you can. Do whatever it takes, but try to get it on an annual contract. Try discount it however you want, and make sure that you're communicating the price in a solid way, even though you know that it's probably going to change. That's really, really important. So some pro tips for this chapter: focus more on volume and velocity. Try to get as many of these things going as you can. Try to get them moving quickly if you can. It's really hard. A lot of them will be slow. That's tough. Don't worry about trying to create a playbook yet. Playbooks, people hear this word and throw this word around in sales a lot. Playbooks are kind of meaningless until you're at multiple millions and like you've closed 20 or 30 deals. So and this is why the founder CEO usually has to do it, because you can't have an employee usually figure out what maybe the next step is, or like, oh, we have to actually change this whole thing, or like, oh, we have to go and pivot, whatever. Like that, most employees can't do that. And if you're expecting that, it's not going to work. So that's why the CEO usually has to do it. Don't worry about the playbook. Don't get disheartened if like 70, 80, 90% of your deals stall out or die. That's totally fine. But just keep trying to find more, keep trying to get the discussions going. And then this last point, I've said this multiple times, but I'll just reinforce it here. Deliver your proposal with conviction. This is what we do. This is what it costs. Stop. This is what it costs. This is how we charge. This is what it costs. Now we'll discount it and maybe we'll give you the first 90 days for free or whatever. But in order for us to know that it's worth our time, we need it to be we need to know that there's a long-term relationship here. Otherwise, why are we here? And most counterparties will understand that. So that's chapter 2. That's getting to 100K. It's still a depressing time because you're hearing no a lot. A lot of things are breaking. You don't necessarily always know what the next step is. So you got to be creative and you got to be, persistent, and you got to just keep your, morale up however you can. Go for a run, listen to happy music, whatever it is. But keep yourself going because you're gonna end up experimenting, and a lot of the experiments are not going to work. That doesn't mean stop experimenting. It means continue experimenting and try to find the data points that work. Okay, so that's getting to 100K. Getting to 300K, and again, that 300K is a real milestone. That's where VCs start to think, okay, maybe there's already some repeatability. If you can get to 300K, if the market is actually big and your product is actually workable. I think the biggest caveat is that if you can get to 300K without doing custom work, if you can do it mostly without customizations, that's a really big milestone. If you can get to 300K from strangers, again, not from flukes or buddies or favors, but if you can get to 300K with a consistent product, maybe a little bit of tweaks, whatever, but like you're really trying to find consistency and repeatability here. And you should start to see some patterns getting to 300K. Like getting to 300K at this point, you need 20, 30, 40 deals. It depends on your deal size, obviously. I get it. There's some math there. But if it's bigger deals, you need fewer, but you need more approvals. It might need to go to some other people to get signatures or whatever. If it's smaller deals, you're getting more velocity, but they might be simpler and easier and faster to get over the line. So you're going to see these consistencies and these patterns. It will feel like you're losing money on some deals, and that's fine. You can do deals where you're underwater, like do deals where you're paying more for your, cloud hosting or LLM usage or whatever. That's not a huge deal, but you're still just trying to get these deals over the line because for you, the value isn't the dollars. Again, it's the repeatable patterns and the process that you're figuring out. So the thing that you're trying to do here is to converge on who's going to look at it and how they're going to look at it and who's going to sign it and approve it and how they're going to do it and what kind of pricing they react to, what kind of language they react to, what is it that gets them to actually commit to working with you for a long period of time. So the pro tips here, I've mentioned these in some different ways, but I'll go through them here. This do things that don't scale. I think this is another quote from Paul Graham, the Y Combinator founder. Do things that don't scale in the short term. So spend a lot of time, again, like spend more money and more time than you're making on these first few. That's fine. So don't worry about saying, okay, we're losing dollars, we're losing time, this is not repeatable, it's not scalable. That's okay. As long as you're learning how to ultimately become repeatable and scalable and efficient and all these things. So that's a really important one. Like the do things that don't scale quote. I think the example that Paul Graham uses was Airbnb. Airbnb is obviously massive. For the first many years, they worked insanely hard, essentially being hotel managers. Like they would run around cleaning up places, they would run around taking photos of venues and posting it. They would go through Craigslist and take things and move the Craigslist posting onto Airbnb. It was an insane amount of work for very little money. It didn't scale, but that was fine because what they were doing was they were learning how to find the scalable and repeatable parts of that whole thing. And they learned how to get, the landlords to take photos themselves and show the landlords that they could make some money. And they were just learning all these things along the way to where they really understood their renters and they really understood their landlords. And they were able to find something that now is worth tens of billions of dollars because they did things that were maybe quote unquote inefficient in the early days. And the second point here, do things as manually as possible. I kind of hinted at that before, but a lot of times, especially senior folks who are used to being the boss, they'll see something that it doesn't scale or is inefficient or whatever, and their first instinct is to go and hire some college kid or an intern to go and do it. I would resist this instinct a lot. It's a very intuitive thing, and you want to fight your intuition here. Do these things manually because when you do them manually, you'll learn how to create a role that you can then hire for, but you don't try to do it the other way around. Don't just imagine that you have a role for someone to go do and then throw them at it. Do it yourself and get your hands dirty and do like low-level things that might seem almost humiliating for an executive, CEO, founder, or whatever. Like throw that in the trash. Get your ego out of it. Go and do things manually as much as you can. Talk to folks on demos. Talk to folks on onboardings. If anyone's trying to churn, try to turn them around. And then this bottom point, I think I skipped a point here, but resist the urge to delegate anything. Nothing is beneath you. You got to do it yourself and really learn it, and then you can hire someone to do these things as someone who's done it before yourself. And this applies not just to operational things, like in the Airbnb example, they ran around taking photos and cleaning up houses and things like that. This applies to other things too. So the other one that I always see people screw up on is prospecting. So going out and finding more meetings. People think, okay, well, a business development rep, a BDR, or a sales development rep, or a customer service person who does things afterwards, most people are used to seeing those as entry level roles that early people like interns or younger, like fresh college grads do. And they'll say, okay, well, we need to go and get a bunch more demos booked. Let's just go hire a young person out of college and just make them go and make phone calls and find some meetings. That is going to be a disaster, I promise. And it's against your intuition because your intuition is telling you, okay, well, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this. I'm going to hire some young person to go do it. Do it yourself and feel the discomfort yourself because you need to be able to pivot the efforts and figure out what parts of that effort are repeatable and scalable in the long term. So that I think, and I've said this in many different ways throughout this entire talk. Get your ego out of the way. You're not above anything, and you need to go and do these things yourself, and then you can start to hire. Like if you can book 20 demos a month as a founder CEO, then go and find someone to go and use your same playbook to do it. But if you can't do it yourself, nobody even knows if it's possible at all because it's a new product, new market, new thing, new everything. So don't think that some kid can go and figure it out for you. Like that's insane. And so many people waste years doing that. So that's a really, really important one. Okay, so to get from 300K to a million, this is already starting to get to be a little bit more like math rather than an art. But the art here, there is still an art and there is still pathfinding here. This is typically where you need other people to sell and close deals. And it's a tough one again, because maybe as the founder CEO, you're very proud and you think you can do it. You're the best closer in the company. It's part of your personality. It's like, oh, I'm a rainmaker. I'm going to go do it all. Even if the deals are slower, make a point of getting some other person to close deals for you. It's super, super important. It means a lot and makes a huge difference. So you're trying to find ways to get other people to book meetings for you, get other people to do demos, get other people to negotiate contracts, get other people to close deals. You can still supervise and be on some of the calls and maybe do the actual final closing bit where you have to go talk to them, whatever. But you really need to prove to yourself and prove to investors and prove to the world that another person can do it. And don't be worried if like, this is another point that I've seen so many times. The really big giant companies out there became big and giant because they had set up systems so that even a B player or a C player can close deals. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. If you understand the process well enough and you can manage the role well enough and make sure people are doing their tasks on a daily basis and weekly and monthly basis and build a quota and they're hitting their quota and whatever, if you've done it right, a B player should still be able to do it. And any of these massive companies out here have tons of B players and tons of C players. But guess what? They're worth $100 billion. They're massively successful. This is Salesforce Tower behind me. Salesforce as a company has an incredible, well thought out process of how to do things. And so they can take almost anyone and train them and have them work in that role and be successful in that role. And they can't just be reliant on the founder CEO being a rainmaker. Like, get out of that rainmaker mindset, go do other things at some point, and like just prove that you can get another person to do it. And so that's kind of the summary of this chapter. So, try to let some things happen on their own, fix the process, let people make mistakes, let some things maybe happen, take a little bit longer. But again, the value here isn't the dollars. It's finding ways to have other people do it and finding ways to make that repeatable and scalable. Because again, if you can train one regular employee to be a good salesperson, then you can do 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 and 100 and 200 and 500 and all of it. And all these companies have hundreds or thousands of salespeople that then you can scale from there. So that's really important. Allow decision making to be owned by the team as a whole. So a lot of CEOs, again, they're used to being the main decision maker. They'll come in and they'll overrule decisions, even if the decision is maybe not quite right. Let people live with it and tweak it and maybe coach them and guide them on how to make the right decision. But let them make a decision, let them own the decision, let them run a deal, let them make some mistakes, let them try to close it. Even if it's not that efficient, get them to do it. And then you're trying to duplicate and clone whatever worked many, many times. You also want to start to build some consistency around weekly check-ins, monthly, quarterly, like try to figure out how many emails, phone calls, meetings, events it takes in a week to get whatever your number is, 20 or 30 demo calls booked in a month. When you get those demo calls, try to figure out what is a consistent amount of demo calls that turn into a real deal. How long do those real deals take to turn into an actual closed, like one deal, and things like that. Those are the big important things. And at Darwinian, this is our big focus is like getting those metrics at least somewhat validated. Like if you can get to 1 million, you have a rough idea of what one person who's not a founder can produce in terms of pipeline, what percentage of that pipeline turns into a closed won deal, how long it takes for that to turn into a closed won deal. It's really, really important that you start to get these figured out. And that's like going to be the most deciding thing for you. So that's the most important part. Okay, so that I think is the end of the sort of 4 chapters. Marianne, I think we have about 10 minutes left, so if you want, we can do a breakout. I don't know how you want to run the questions, but that's pretty much those are the main big chapters. I really wish all of you guys the most luck and success and good fortune as you go out on this journey. It's a lot of, you know, character building, and you got to be perseverant. But if you can get to 300K and you can get to 1 million, you're already now, you've got a business at that point. And that is worth all of the pain and discomfort and rejection in the world to get there. So, yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'd love to talk further. If any of you guys are looking at actually building out your sales process, again, we can have a breakout conversation. If you're looking at bringing in some help, we'd love to help you there. But a lot of this stuff you can figure out yourself, and do yourself, as long as you just avoid those really common mistakes and some of the counterintuitive stuff. Just try to take some notes, take these slides, and try to avoid the most common pitfalls that most people make. So that is where I will pause. Marianne, I'll let you say some words and we can take some questions or do a breakout. Oh, I didn't even see the chat. Let me go through this. Sorry, a whole bunch of stuff here. Let's see what we got. I read somewhere only 10%. Yeah, exactly. It takes an average, yep, 2 years. That's probably about right. Bootstrap, it takes a little longer. Yes. Do you find products like Library AI Path? I don't know that one, but I can take a look. I've been told that discounting early stage software too deeply is a mistake. Yeah, so Todd says a point here that discounting early stage software. Yeah, so look, the dollars aren't important. The most important thing is that it renews into a price that you want. So if you can get an annual contract over the line and give them a 90-day opt-out, so maybe they have the ability to terminate if they want, and give them a really steep discount in the early days, but make sure that they understand that the price will go to normal if they stick around. I think that's the biggest mistake. Like that's a misconception. There's a little bit of nuance there. As long as you're delivering the price and the price is reasonable and it can even be high, but to get it to sign, you can discount it in the short term as long as it renews by default or somehow moves back to normal. And they know that. They have to understand that. It can't be like a trick. That I think is the most important point there. But you're right. You don't want to discount and just give things away for free. You can only do that with the condition that it's understood that it'll roll into what you want longer term. Deep speak, paranoid syndrome. Yes. Taking notes. Any other questions? What if you get to 300K or 1 million through a merger or acquisition? Well, that is just some really small M&A. I mean, if you want to, yeah, I don't know if there's too much to take away from doing M&A at a really small stage. I mean, you can try, but I don't think the principles really change much. Like if you're going to do a small M&A and you get another 200K or 300K of revenue, that's small potatoes. Like you're not going to be a billionaire Mark Benioff, Mark Zuckerberg guy doing that. You still need to do the same things. Like you're still looking for ways to get a complete like a hire an employee to make sales again. You're still going to have to figure out what works to get these things done. Like it doesn't matter what you do to get to a million, even if you do M&A and sort of buy your way to a million, your job is not done. You still have to go and figure out how do you get a hire to do the selling? How do you get like repeatability around pipeline creation and deal closing and all that? Um, Ray asked a question, what is the sales team size at 300 to a million? Yeah. So the sales like look like it should really just be the founder CEO for the first two, 300K. Now, sometimes we'll help early and they'll use our services. We're really unique in that our whole thing is this pathfinding experimentation thing. So we're like the one exception that you could use our help to try to get there, but you really want to try to do as much as you can yourself. And then you can start to hire maybe your first sales hire. But even then, you might not want to start with a deal closer. And a lot of people make this mistake. They'll hire somebody who has a track record of selling a million a year or 2 million a year or something like that. And these entrepreneurs will think, great, we're going to hire someone who usually sells 2 million a year. We're now going to get 2 million a year eventually once they're ramped. That is very flawed thinking because at their former company, that person may have already had product market fit and they already had deals coming to them and people already understood what the company sold and they already understood what it was. They knew what it competed against. It was a bigger company with infrastructure. It had marketing, it had lead gen, it had all these things figured out. So for that salesperson to say, oh, I closed 2 million a year is completely wrong because they just signed contracts worth 2 million a year. They didn't necessarily find the leads, teach them what the product was, teach them what the company did. Like a lot of that stuff is already done at a big company. So you might actually start to hire deal sourcers first. Like you might find prospecting people first who make the calls and set the demos, like appointment setting. Like you might do that before you hire a salesperson. You might hire a CSM, like a customer success person who deals with your already closed customers and start to build that as a role. And maybe you keep yourself as the deal closer for the first little while. But again, your instinct might be to go and hire your first deal closer first, which I think is a mistake. So that's to Ray's question about what sales team size. From 300K to a million, you can hire a couple of support roles, maybe. You can hire a firm like ours or hire people that are like us in the fact that they can help you with the experimentation, but you don't want to go and hire deal closers. So you might have one or two folks, but they're more in support roles versus hiring a closer. Yeah, prospecting is a lot of work. It's a lot of discomfort. Prospecting is everything. It's everything. If you can get 20 or 30 demos in a month consistently, that is 90% of the battle. Full stop. That's it. Because you can screw up as many times as you want. You can screw up half of them because you'll get another 30 the next month. And you can screw up on pricing, screw up on features, screw up on everything. You can be like whatever. And you can learn from all of that. So a lot of people think about these things backwards. They think about closing deals first. So let's go hire a deal closer. Let's focus on deal closing. How do I get deals to move faster to close? Close. That's BS. What you should actually be doing is trying to find ways to get first conversations consistently. It's a lot of work. It's extremely uncomfortable. But if you can crack it, you're invincible. Because it doesn't matter how many times you screw up. You can get more and more pipeline and meetings and things like that. And all these giant companies, the Salesforces and SAPs and Microsofts and all these big companies that most of you should be thinking about as like your role models, they have armies of people that never stop trying to figure out prospecting. I know this because I've worked with them. There's mountains of like any of these big companies have thousands of prospecting people and they're always experimenting and their marketing team is always experimenting with different conferences, venues, ad campaigns, billboards, whatever, it doesn't matter. They're really, really trying. Oh, my screen share. I messed up. They're really, I'm just